And holy crap, we are live. And welcome everybody to B.Hive Productions special 2024 Halloween special, brought to you tonight by Winthrop Mercantile. How's that for a plug? How is that for a plug? We're a couple minutes late, and I apologize. Had to get the pumpkin spice going. You can't read a Halloween story without that. Anyhow, I want to thank you all for joining me. Thank you all very much for sharing this event, this live event tonight. I've seen a lot of shares going out there on the interwebs, and I greatly appreciate it. Bobby, welcome, my friend. So tonight's story that I put together was put together with the help of you guys. Hey, Shannon, happy Halloween to you as well, buddy. What I did was I put out some prompts out there to you guys and had you vote on certain subjects and stuff like that. Kevin, welcome to another night of no sleep. And what we put together, I made a story out of it. And it's a story that I call Home is Where the Heart Is. Kind of a creepy thing about this story is that, well, the story is about a haunted dollhouse that ends up at an antique store, and it emulates the house of its owners, and it's haunted by some vengeful spirits. Um, how this came about? It was just I just threw some prompts out there at you guys, and at first it was kind of tough, but towards the end there, I started developing the story in my head, and then I started getting really anxious to write it. So I appreciate you guys out there voting and all that groovy stuff. And I'm really excited to read the story to you guys tonight. There are the creepy caveat with this story is that Bobby was had found himself a dollhouse on the side of the road, and he brought it in, and he owns an antique store. So there you go. So the family in this story is loosely based on Bobby and his family, and one of his friends is loosely based on me if I was an old man that tinkered around with dollhouses. So so there's that, and the you'll have to, if you guys make it out to Winthrop, which I totally encourage you guys to come out here and check out our new downtown. There are some pretty cool shops in town. We have the Gypsy Sisters. We have the Lavender Boutique. We got a health club coming in. We've got Bobby's Antique Store, the Winthrop Mercantile. We also have, I believe there's rumors that there's another antique store coming in as well. Well, happy Halloween, Joan. Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to apologize ahead of time for what I do to your son's family in this book. Okay, so anyhow, some really good news is my new book, Thin Spots, was released today. And it is available on Amazon in paperback and also in Kindle form. And it's a big book. And I just got my copies. Hey neighbor, how are you doing? Happy Halloween to you. I just got my copy in the mail today. And there's the back, Thin Spots by Bradley Bodeker. And here is the back part. There's my press file, my press photo. So anyhow, it's a thick one. It's a 2.5 pound book. Thank you, Bobby. Thanks. I'm very proud of this one. And of course, of course, we'll be reading from this on Horror Hump Days sometime soon. Um, there's a story in here called Midnight Dreary, and it is the origin story of the Anti-Claus who we met last night in Anti-Claus is Coming to Town. So that's in that book. Thanks, Shannon. I have your, by the way, I have your guys' copies of one. Hey, Chuck, welcome. I've got one copy going to, well, one went to Kyle already. I saw him today. One will be going to Bobby, one will be going to Shannon, and one to Kevin. Kyle. And the other one will be going to Dwayne, who won the contest that night. I think what I'll do is I will have something tonight that somebody else can win a signed copy of the book, and I'll get it to you. So we'll figure that out here as the night goes on. But anyhow, yes, we're celebrating that. We're celebrating Halloween. I've got the candles and the little memorial for my mom back there. So, yeah, I think I'm all set. With celebrating this holiday. I totally ignored all the trick-or-treaters that were roaming the neighborhood. Holy cow, Main Street was crazy. I went to pick up a pizza. That's how Steph and I celebrated the release of my book. And I went to pick up a pizza, and on my way back home, the streets were filled with kids. And it's not time for Merry Christmas yet, Bobby, so just save it, buddy. Huh? Put that in your back pocket. Pump your brakes. It's not Christmas yet. We still got Thanksgiving to go through. My goodness. Anyhow, yeah, so I ignored all the trick-or-treaters, and here we are. Tomorrow the beard is going away. Shaving that puppy off. Because every time I eat or drink something, a little chunk of her comes off. Anyway, yes. So, since the gang's all here, sing that Christmas songs, you'll get your chance to hear us play Christmas. Bobby and I, after Tunes for Tuesday, we actually we played some Christmas songs together, ran through some Christmas songs, and yeah, I think he videotaped some of that, which I'm going to have to get a hold of that video because it's a little incriminating evidence against that. So, yeah. But, yeah, you guys hang on to your little Christmas Jones. You still got over a month yet for it. So, there. All right. So, in the spirit of Halloween, let's jump into Home is Where the Heart Is. And I don't know about you guys, but this background sound effect thing is kind of distracting, so I'm turning her down a little bit. There, that's a little better. All right, here we go. Let's take my sip here. Home is where the heart is. Paul loved this time of year. The snow blanketed the landscape, and the sun glistened on the crystals of snow. Also, his favorite holiday was just over a month away. It was Christmas every day in his world, but it was especially his favorite when the whole family was on the same page as him. He was just coming into town from his day job. He was a parts manager at a Dodge dealership in nearby Glen Cove. Paul always took the scenic route, which meant the country roads. What normally would take 30 minutes on the highway took an hour on the dirt roads. His Tahoe was in four-wheel drive, and the tires crunched along in the new snow. The Eagle City Water Tower peaked above the treetops of town. Eagle City was surrounded by tall, ancient pines, with Eagle Lake wrapping around the east side of town. He and Liz moved here 3 summers ago with their 3 children. They had opened up a small antique store in the center of town called Lakeside Mercantile, which they did fairly well, but not well enough for them to quit their day jobs. Just before the tires hit the tar, he slowed down. On the side of the road sat an old dollhouse. It was made of wood and looked to be handmade. He pulled over and put the truck in park, pulled on his gloves, and walked out. He looked around and thought it was odd that such a beautiful thing was just sitting there in the snow on the side of the road. He bent down and brushed the snow off the balsa-shingled roof, being careful not to pull any of them off. The craftsmanship was remarkable, and he couldn't believe someone would just discard it like this. Paul peeked inside the tiny windows, and it was dark inside, almost too dark. Lenny does Christmas songs. I'm sure he does. Fun story with creepy similarities to a family we know. Yes, very much so, Maya. Welcome, by the way. He opened the hatch on his truck and carefully placed it inside. He was happy. He always loved picking, and this had to be one of his favorite finds. Liz had just started a pot of coffee when he walked into the store. The aroma was intoxicating, and he kissed her as she was rearranging some of the displays before opening. "How was work?" she asked with a smile. "Work was work," he said, and pecked her on the lips with his own. "And you?" "Kids are fighting in the lunchroom, but otherwise good." "Not our kids." "Oh, God, no. The usual rabble-rousers." "I picked something up on the side of the road." Liz sighed. "Again? Wait till you see it." He grinned like a schoolboy. "It's going to be perfect for the store." "You say that every time you come in with some junk you found on the side of the road." No. Trust me on this." Paul walked back out, and Liz poured herself a cup. Her eyes widened when he came in the door with a giant wooden dollhouse. "Oh, my God," she exclaimed. "Right?" he said. "I haven't looked it over yet, but it looks like it's in pretty good condition." He set it down on the countertop next to the register. Snow was still melting on the foundation and the rooftop. "Where did you find this?" she asked. "On the side of the road," he answered. "Just before you come into town on Shoreline Avenue. It was just sitting there in the snow, waiting for me." "It's kind of worn looking." "Well, it's old, obviously." Liz peeked into the windows and also saw how dark it was inside. "Does this open?" she asked, looking it over. "I don't know," he said. "It must." He found 2 tiny brass hooks that were fastened onto the 2 small nails on the side of the house. He flicked them, and he tried to pull the 2 sides of the house open. It was a struggle at first, and he couldn't see a seam from where the 2 sides would meet. There was a loud crunching sound, and the 2 halves separated. "Aha!" Paul announced victoriously. Sounds just like Liz, drinking coffee and sighing about rabble-rousers. Liz held her breath for a moment. There was something about the darkness inside the dollhouse that unnerved her. Nothing serious, but it tingled the back of her neck when her eyes searched through the windows, trying to make out shapes inside. There was nothing spectacular inside. There were generic-looking rooms with generic-looking furniture. There were no delicate details on the interior compared to the exterior. It was anticlimactic. Paul had a disappointed expression on his face. "Well," Liz tried to reassure him, "it's a blank slate." "We don't have time to renovate this," he mumbled. The price tag just went down. "What you got there?" came a voice at the front door. Lyle Ledbetter had come in every evening at opening, since they opened the doors to the mercantile. He would sit on the old antique rocker and share a cup of coffee with them and chat for an hour, and then go on his way. "Ah," Paul said, staring disappointed at the interior of the dollhouse. "I picked this up on the side of the road. Thought I had a big money maker here, but this interior is pretty blah." Lyle looked it over with a careful eye. "Got some potential there." "I haven't got the time to try and furnish this thing, leave alone add some flavor to it." "Huh. What?" "Well, I used to make these. Kind of a hobby of mine. Made them for the kids for Christmas and did a few for the neighborhood kids back in the day." "You think this one is yours?" "I can't say for sure," Lyle exclaimed, examined it closer. "It's rather good handiwork, but I would have put a lot more heart into the inside." Liz handed Lyle a steaming cup of coffee. "Do you think you could fix it up?" "Well," Lyle pondered, "I haven't tinkered around with doll houses for a while, but I could give it a shot." Paul's eyes brightened, but then darkened again. "Money's kind of tight right now. I couldn't pay you." "Well, I've got leftover material at my workbench at home, and I've always had my eye on that old railroad lantern you got in back." "It's yours," Paul said with renewed happiness. "Seriously, if there's anything else you... Like I said, I haven't tinkered in quite some time, but for that lantern, I'd sure do my best." "I'm sure your best would be more than enough to spruce it up." "Well, do you want me to paint it on the outside?" "Whatever you think would help this old house." Liz noticed something tucked in the back of the dollhouse. "Hello," she said, reaching in. "What is this?" She pulled out 6 clay figures. They were generic human shapes with no features. "Plain folks," Lyle commented, "for a plain house." She couldn't believe that the figures still felt moist and pliable. She moved them around in her hands, and suddenly she felt one of them move. She gasped and dropped them on the floor. "Liz, what?" Paul said, leaning over to pick them up. She stared at her hands, covered in clay residue. I'm sorry," she said. I thought that... Lyle reached for the figures, and Paul handed them to him. "They're still moist," he commented. "Can you just put them back in the house?" Liz said nervously. Lyle lifted an eyebrow at her and then placed them back inside the house where she pulled them from. Paul closed the dollhouse and latched the hooks. "So," he said, holding out his hand, "do we have a deal?" "Agreed," Lyle said, and pumped his friend's hand. "Do you want the lantern now?" Paul asked. "I'll grab it tomorrow," Lyle said. "About how long on the dollhouse?" Give me 2 weeks. If I got time, I could possibly carve some life into those clay figures. Give the owners of the house some personality." "That would be great." Liz only shivered a bit. Lyle lifted the house and walked out onto Main Street. Paul looked over at Liz. She was a little pale and looked shaken. "Honey," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder, "are you okay?" "Yeah," she said shakily. "Yeah, I'm good." She went to the sink and scrubbed the clay from her hands. 2. He shouldn't have brought the car. Lyle only lived 2 blocks away from the mercantile, but he had emphysema. The thin lining of his lungs burned. He could walk at a slow pace without too much trouble, but when he had to carry something, breathing was hard. It If there was a frigid wind, like most Minnesota winters have, breathing was impossible, even at a slow pace. When his breath was short, his bladder became overactive, and he hurriedly put the house down on his coffee table and kicked off his boots. In the rush to do all this and make it to the bathroom without pissing himself, he pricked his finger on a nail that was sticking out from the soffit of the dollhouse. He yelped as he walked rapidly to the bathroom. "Well, hi, William. Welcome." He watched urine gush into the toilet bowl, and soon blood began to drip from his finger, mingling with the stream of urine. "God damn it," he cursed. His head always pounded when he had an episode of breathlessness. He'd pop a few Tylenols after he cleaned up his finger. After he'd gained his breath back and the headache was down to a dull thud, he walked out to the living room and picked up the house again, being careful not to prick himself again. He snapped on the light to the basement and carried the dollhouse down to his workbench. His cat, Linus, followed him down, meowing for attention. "Don't trip me up, you fuzzy little shit," he scolded. Linus meowed in defiance. He placed the house on his workbench and pulled the cord on the overhead light. Linus jumped up on the bench and then stopped suddenly at the dollhouse. The cat's ears went back, and the hair went up on his back, as if static electricity moved through his body. "Easy now, Linus," Lyle chuckled. The cat let out a low, guttural cry and hissed and spit. "What has gotten into you?" He hissed again, and his claws extended and buried themselves into the wood-top workbench. "You better get used to it," he said, shooing his cat off the workbench. "It's going to be our guest for a few weeks." Linus ran up the steps. Lyle shrugged and snapped the overhead light off and walked back upstairs. He didn't hear the crunching and snapping that came from within the dollhouse. It sounded like the snapping of bones and dry wooden sticks. 3. The morning started as usual. Linus would climb up on Lyle's chest and meow. When Lyle continued snoring, his cat would gently paw his long, bearded chin. Lyle would then smack his lips and wave his cat away. Linus would then return and repeat a few more times until Lyle opened his eyes and cursed at his cat. Linus would jump down and wait impatiently by the bedroom door. Lyle would automatically reach over to the other side of the bed, looking for his wife Diane. Then her death would dawn on him, and sadness would pull on his heart. The first 3 years after her death, he would weep. But now a few tears would trickle down his cheek as he sat up and jammed his feet into a pair of slippers. "Okay, buddy," he'd say to his cat. "Let's go make some coffee." He would pour himself a bowl of granola cereal, and then a cup of coffee, and add a dash of half and half. He would then fill a saucer with a layer of cream and put it on the kitchen floor for Linus, and he would eat his breakfast and sip his coffee while his brain woke up. Normally, after that, he would brush his teeth and brush his charcoal gray hair and put his galoshes on and bundle up with his coat and take a walk into town, wave at everyone, maybe talk to a few people out and about, and then make his way back to read the daily paper. But today was a little different. Today he had a task ahead of him. The dollhouse. He hadn't built one in several years, and he was excited to have some use to someone. He shuffled his way to the basement door. "You coming alone, Linus?" he asked his cat, who looked up from her cat tree. She looked indifferent. "Well, guess I'm going solo today." He continued his way downstairs. He pulled the cord on the overhead lights above his workbench. He dug around in the dusty cubby holes he had fashioned to hold all of his doll furniture, wallpaper, paints, and replacement parts. He placed a few of the items down on the workbench next to the house and pulled a stool up and sat down. "Okay," he said. "Let's see what we can do for you." He undid the brass hooks on the side of the house and divided it into two, swiveling on two hinges. Lyle squinted and examined the rooms. Something had changed. He wasn't quite sure exactly what, but it was different somehow. He reached up and grabbed the lamp that's strapped around his head and the magnifying glass that fitted onto the frame of his glasses. Was it the configuration of rooms? He thought for a moment. He looked over each room. He thought for sure when he looked at it with Paul and Liz it was different. Maybe the size of the rooms, or was it the placement of them? In any case, it was still generic looking, and he thought it needed that Ledbetter touch. He took out the wooden blocks that served as furniture and set them aside, and then gathered the clay dolls and placed them on the other side of the dollhouse. He picked up a sample of miniature wallpaper with a tweezers and held it up to the wall. His hands trembled a little, and had since he gave up the bottle several years ago. As he picked up another sample and held it up to another wall, he heard a thump on the other side of the dollhouse. At first he thought it was Linus finally coming down to supervise his work. He looked up and didn't see a long black tail slithering above the roof. "Linus?" he muttered and stood up to look. No, his cat was nowhere to be seen. He sat back down and picked up the wallpaper sample again and held it up. Thump! "What the hell is—" he said, and stood up again, looking behind the dollhouse. The clay figures were lying about, separate from each other. He grimaced, knowing full well he stacked them all together. His plan was to meld them all together and make a new family. But here they were, lying apart from one another. Just then, he swore he saw the featureless arm move on one of the clay figures. He flipped up the magnifier and removed its glasses. "The fuck?" he said. He reached a trembling hand towards the figurine, and it moved again. He snapped his hand back as if he'd been bitten. "Oh, Jesus on a crutch!" He stood up. He grabbed the tweezer and poked it a few times. No response. He stabbed at it quickly, and it didn't respond. Lyle sat back down and sighed. He took a long gulp from his coffee and stared back at the clay figure. Was it sitting up now? He picked it up and began moving its limbs back and forth. He still couldn't get over how pliable the clay was. It should be dry and flaky if it was as old as the house. Lyle went to put it back down on the bench with the rest of the figures, and it wouldn't leave his hand. "What the—" he muttered. He opened his fingers, and the clay figure had melded with his hand. Lyle pulled at it, but it wouldn't detach from his hand. After wrestling with it, it melded onto his other hand. Panic began to rise in him. His face was dripping with sweat as he was able to finally pull his hands apart, but now there were clumps of clay over both of his hands, and it seemed like it was growing. Soon it had covered both his arms. His fingers were completely engulfed, and he could not separate them. He tumbled up the steps, and the clay had completely covered his torso. "Stop this!" he screamed. By the time he reached the top riser, it was coming up his neck and covering his face. He had to reach the phone. Call 911, without knowing how he was going to dial without the use of his fingers. As his head was slowly absorbed, his feet kicked, and they were soon immobilized by the stretching clay. Linus jumped down from his perch and slowly approached the writhing clay cocoon, his nose sniffing the air, noticing a slight hint of his human's scent. Slime dripped from the bubbling clay clump, and the cat backed away and hid in the shelter of his carpeted tree. Hey, Marie, welcome. I gotta take a sip of this. Good stuff. 4. Paul had no sooner flipped the close sign to open than his friend stood before the front window. Lyle was holding the house and staring into the store, not really seeing Paul, just staring. "Lyle?" Paul said, opening the front door. Lyle stood there. No hat or coat. He was wearing his pajama pants, and his feet were in soaking wet slippers. He was also not wearing his glasses. "Hey, bud," Paul said. Are you okay?" "The house," Lyle said in a flat tone, still staring into the store. "You wanted the house." "Well, of course. We haven't seen you for a couple of weeks." "I said a couple of weeks." You did. I meant, I don't know, you usually stop in for coffee when we open. Haven't seen you. Liz and I got worried." "Do you want the house?" Yes. Come in. Lyle walked robotically through the door, and Paul took the house from him and set it on the counter. Lyle only stood there, not really looking at anything, just staring towards the back of the store. "Hey, have you been okay?" "The lantern." Sorry?" "The lantern, you deaf son of a bitch. You promised me the fucking lantern." Paul felt like his face had been slapped. Of course." Paul tried to collect himself. Lyle had always been friendly, and Paul thought of him as family. He didn't understand why his demeanor had changed so drastically. Would you like a cup of coffee?" "I didn't ask for coffee," Lyle said in a low voice. "I asked for the lantern. I did a service for you. Now I expect to receive what we agreed upon." "Yeah, but usually you have a cup of—" "Take your coffee and shove it up your ass, but bring me the lantern first." Paul's face went flush with momentary anger. There was no excuse for the rude behavior, and part of him wanted to punch the old man, but he took a deep breath. "No need to be rude," Paul spat. "I'll bring you the lantern." Paul returned from the back room and held out the lantern. "Do you want me to wrap it?" he asked in a short tone. For the first time, Lyle looked at Paul. There was something blank and sinister in Lyle's eyes that made Paul take a step back from his friend. "Wrap this," Lyle said, holding up his middle finger. "What the hell did I do to you?" Paul asked. Lyle snatched the antique railroad lantern from him with the start of a grin on the corner of his mouth. "Enjoy the house," Lyle said, turned, and walked back out into the wintry evening. Paul looked down and saw there was a puddle where his friend stood, and it looked like urine. "Did he just piss on my goddamn floor?" he muttered to himself and walked into the back room to grab the mop and bucket. Liz came in when he was finishing up his mopping. "What's up?" she asked as she came in for a kiss. "Lyle is up," Paul said angrily. "He came in?" "Yeah, dropped the dollhouse off. He was strange, angry for no reason. He didn't even want a cup of coffee with me." "Maybe he was having a bad day." "Maybe, but he was really aggressive. He even pissed on the floor." "What?" "Yeah, and he demanded, and I mean demanded, the old railroad lantern." "Well, he's getting up there in age. Older men tend to have accidents. That was no accident. Calm down. I don't want our customers seeing you all red and angry. Let's go take a look at the dollhouse. I don't even want the goddamn thing anymore. They noticed right away that it had been altered. Not so much for the worse, but for the better. The shape was familiar to them both. Is that, Liz hesitated, our house? The siding had been painted white, and the trim around the windows had been painted a light blue, just like their home. Has he even been to our house? Paul asked. A few times, Liz remembered, when you had a bunch of people over for a barbecue, and a few other times you wanted to show him some antiques you had picked up when you were in Fair Lakes. Paul opened the house, and they both stared in awe. Lyle had replicated the interior of their home almost perfectly. It made Liz shiver and Paul excited. Oh my God! Paul exclaimed. This is awesome! It's kind of creepy, she remarked. There was a clay figure in each bedroom. There were 4, 3 for the kids and 1 for Paul and Liz. There was a figure in the bathroom sitting on the toilet. That one made him chuckle to himself. That one must be me, Paul said. You don't find any of this wrong? She asked. What's wrong about it? It's the most amazing thing I've seen in a while. The detail is stunning. He even has the guitars hanging up in the living room. I don't understand how he... I don't know. The furnishings and the photos and posters on the walls. Everything is... It's too perfect. Come on, are you telling me none of this is cool to you? Not really. I feel bad for being so quick to judge Lyle now. Paul, he pissed on the floor. Like you said, it was probably an accident. Seriously? I think we should bring it home. I think the kids are going to totally dig it. Liz looked at the clay figurines and thought about how that clay felt in her hands and how she thought that it moved. She grimaced at the house, walked away, and started to straighten out some of the items on the shelves. 5. What are you doing? Liz asked. Paul had packed up some of his wife's chocolate chip cookies in an old tin he grabbed from the cupboard. I just feel bad about how things were left with Lyle, he said. I just want to walk over and offer an olive branch to him. Liz sighed. She loved the kindness her husband had towards anybody, especially his friends, but she also disliked the way people walked all over that as well. Lenny is not going to be happy about you giving away his cookies, she said. Lenny was their youngest, and to be fair, Lenny had a big heart like his dad. He'll understand, Paul said, snapping the lid on the tin. Paul put on his winter coat and his Elmer Fudd hat, with his Carhartt bib overalls, sorrel boots, and alpaca gloves. Her husband had not looked more Minnesotan at any other time in the 15 years they had been together. Just be careful, please. She lightly grabbed his arm. Of course, he smiled. What's going to go wrong? She wanted to say that it was off what Lyle had done. Out of character for the man who had joined them for meals, supported them when they opened the shop, and always had an ear for any member of the Robertson family when needed. Just be careful, she said, and kissed his bearded cheek. She wished he'd take the dollhouse back to the store with him. It gave her the creeps. They had plenty of creepy things come in and out of their antique store. The old porcelain dolls, old photographs where the subjects all looked like they were dead when they were photographed, paintings where the subjects seemed to stare at you when you walked by them, and even furniture that just gave off the worst vibes. But none of those items made her skin crawl as bad as this dollhouse did. She wanted it sold as soon as possible. Hey, cuz. But now that Paul brought it home, she was afraid the kids would take a shine to it and want to keep it. What's that? Jill, her oldest, asked from behind her. What? She jumped. Oh, Jesus. Why do you creep like that? Take it easy, Mom, her daughter was laughing. Hey, that looks like our house. Your dad picked it up on the roadside. He found it? Yeah. How did he find a dollhouse that looked exactly like our house? That's just whack. It didn't when your father found it. He had Mr. Ledbetter work on it, and he brought it back like this. Get out! Open up, I want to see it. I'd rather you didn't. But it was too late. Jill had already opened it and began to marvel at all the likeness of their home in miniature. Oh my God, Jill remarked. He got my room exact. How did he get the posters right? There was a poster of Pearl Jam and David Bowie on the exact walls that were posted in her room. I don't know, Liz said. Don't you find that kind of creepy? Well, Jill thought about it. Kinda, but it's Mr. Ledbetter. Liz thought about Lyle pissing on the mercantile floor. I think it's cool, Jill continued. And check this out. Jill reached for the clay figurine that was sitting at the miniature desk in what represented her room. Liz hissed. What? Jill hesitated. Nothing, Liz lied. Jill picked up the figurine and looked at it up close. Kind of plain, she said. Yeah. Maybe Mr. Ledbetter wanted us to shape them ourselves. Maybe. Well, there's one of you in the laundry room, and one for Lenny in his room sitting in front of his TV. And there's Dad on the toilet. And Chrissy is on her beanbag in her room. Liz tried to look at all of this as a gift that Lyle had left for them, but something inside of her felt violated. He knew the layout of the house. He had been here before, but something about this didn't seem right. I'm going to take this upstairs with me, Jill said. I'm going to work on it. Try to make it look like me. Liz hated that idea, but she thought if she said what was on her mind, her daughter would think she was crazy. Dinner'll be ready in about an hour, she shouted after her. Hey, where's Dad? Jill asked before making it to the top of the steps. He went over to Mr. Ledbetter's house. Jeez, I think those two are dating. Liz let out a little laugh. On a normal night, especially tater tot hot dish night, it would take her one holler to get the kids to the dinner table. Lenny was the first to sit. Chrissy came down after the second shout, but Jill still did not show up. Chrissy, she said, go get your sister. Tell her supper's ready. I just sat down, Mom, she protested. Lenny. Aw, Mom, Lenny said and stood up to get his sister. A few seconds later, Lenny was back at the dinner table. Did you even tell her? Liz asked. Yeah, Lenny said, scooping up a generous portion of tater tots, cream of mushroom soup, green beans, corn and onion crispies all molded into a hot, steamy casserole dish of goodness. Lenny, we're saying grace first. He sighed, and then Jill came down the steps. Slowly, one step at a time, and then paused at the bottom before turning towards her family. For a moment, Liz swore she didn't recognize her, but as she stepped into the light of the dining room, She looked normal. "Did you fall asleep?" Liz asked. "Mind your business," Jill said without looking at her. "Excuse me?" "Hey, you guys, check this out." Jill ignored her mother's question and produced a clay figurine that looked like a rough version of herself. "Whoa," Lenny said. "That is so cool." "Yeah, Jill," Chrissy commented. "You've never been the artist in the family." Jill's face turned red, and she stood up. "Why don't you shut your whore mouth?" "Jill Jean," Liz scolded. "We do not talk like that in this home." "I didn't mean anything by it," Chrissy said. "I was just saying you don't—" "Well, stop saying," Jill spat. "No one gives an ass-clinging shit what you have to say." "That is quite enough," Liz shouted. "Apologize to your sister and then go up to your room." "What fucking ever?" Jill didn't apologize. She stood up, threw her clay likeness on the table, and stomped her way upstairs. "You'll deal with your father when he gets home," Liz shouted up to her, and her door slammed. "What the hell got into her?" Chrissy asked. "Clean it up, please," Liz said, visibly upset. "Come on, let's say grace." The Jill figurine was facing her, with a sad frown on its face. "Lenny," she said, "please take that thing off the dinner table and put it in the dollhouse." "Sure, Mom," he said. Lenny placed his oldest sister's likeness in the miniature room. He dropped it first because he thought it moved in his hands. He shook his head and picked her up and placed it onto the bed. He found his clay figure and placed it into his breast pocket and went back to the supper table. After they finished supper and Chrissy was helping her with the dishes, Lenny had gone up to his room. "Are you okay, Mom?" Chrissy asked. "I'm worried about your sister," she admitted. "She's never spoken to you or I like that before." Maybe she's having girl issues." "She's never been like that." "Boy problems?" "I don't know, honey. I should talk to her after dishes." "Go talk to her now. I'll finish up." Liz smiled at her daughter. She dried her hands on the dish towel and walked up the stairs to Jill's room. A few knocks, and no answer. "Jill?" she said softly. "Jill, honey, can we talk?" There was only silence. She was about to walk back downstairs when she heard a muffled cry coming from Lenny's room. She walked over and tapped on his door. "Lenny?" she said. "Lenny, are you okay?" She opened his door. His desk light was still on, and there was clay smeared on the table surface. His comforter was pulled up over his head on the bed, and beneath it, he stirred. Lenny wanted so badly to scream out in sheer terror to his mother, but the bubbling clay had entered his mouth and was filling his trachea. The rest of it cocooned his body and tightened when he tried to wriggle away. She walked over and looked around for the clay figurine that he had in his pocket, but it was nowhere to be found. She shrugged and snapped off the desk lamp and left her son to sleep. When Liz returned downstairs, she found Chrissy staring at the dollhouse. "Everything all right?" Chrissy asked. "I don't know," Liz said, disappointed. She didn't answer. "She'll be better by morning." "This thing is kind of creepy." "Oh my God, right? It looks like our house. Did Dad make this?" "No, Mr. Ledbetter." "Wow, that's extra creepy." "You're the only one that agrees with me on that." Chrissy picked up her figurine as if it were covered in cooties. This is kind of gross, Chrissy said. How is it still moist? I don't know, Liz said. Your dad found it on the roadside and had Mr. Ledbetter fix it up. These clay things were in it? I guess. Weird. Look, I'm tired of looking at this thing. Do you have anything you need washed? I'm going to put in a load in the washer. Nope. Kinda uncanny, that figurine of Jill. It looks like her, but it doesn't. You know? She was right. Liz could tell it was her eldest daughter, but there was something different about it. That horrible sadness in the figurine's eyes. Was it the expression on the thing's face that was familiar? Liz left her daughter to start the laundry. On the way, she picked up the phone to call Paul at Lyle's house. It rang once, and then the line clicked. We're sorry. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. If you feel you've reached this message in error, please dial Velocity Telecom Services. She hung up. That's weird, she thought. Did Lyle get his phone turned off? She dialed her husband's cell phone. Hey, this is Paul Robertson. I'm away from the phone right now. Please leave your name and number, and I'll be happy to get back to you. Beep. Liz sighed. Maybe he's on his way back. Just couldn't hear the phone during the snowmobile. Right? 6. Lyle lived 8 blocks from the Robertsons, and Paul took the scenic route. He putted along in his 1973 Skidoo snowmobile through the alleyways. When he approached Lyle's house, a frown formed on his lips. The lights were out, except for the one above his kitchen sink. Happy Halloween, Jason, and welcome. He turned off the snowmobile and grabbed his cookie tin. If anything, he will just leave it on the steps if he's not home. He tapped lightly on the glass of Lyle's door. There was faint shuffling in the darkness beyond his vision. Perhaps it was just his cat, Linus, he thought to himself. Cats sometimes get a little rambunctious and knock things over. Paul walked over to Lyle's garage and peeked into the windows. His 1968 Pontiac sat there in the dark. He walked back up the steps to his door and knocked again. Hey! Paul shouted. Lyle, you okay, buddy? There was no movement. He thought about trying the doorknob, but then withdrew his hand. He thought about the sore mood Lyle was in earlier, and thought he would just leave the cookies and head home. His boots crunched in the snow as he descended the steps, and when he mounted his old snowmobile, he heard a muffled voice. What do you want? It said. Paul lifted the flaps of his hat and looked over. There in the dimness of his porch, his friend stood, the housecoat loosely drifting with the winter breeze, swollen ankles and wet slippers, and his arms slack at his sides. Hey, brother, Paul said, walking back towards the porch. I felt bad about how we ended things at the shop today. I've brought you over some of Liz's chocolate chip cookies. I ain't your brother, Lyle spat. I got my lamp, and I don't need any goddamn cookies. Why are you being like this? We've been friends for too long. Can't we just, I don't know, sit and have a cup of coffee and bury the hatchet? Lyle only stood there. The shadow of the overhang covered his face. The only thing Paul could see is the shine from his eyes. Bury the hatchet, Lyle mumbled. Yes, Paul said, relieved. I'd like that very much. Lyle turned and walked into his house, leaving the door open. Paul took that as an invitation and walked up the steps and entered the house. The only things he could make out in the light given off by the bare bulb above his sink were the table and chairs in his kitchen, and dark smudges on the walls that could have been photographs or paintings. "Lyle?" he called out into the darkness. There was a chilling chuckle coming from the shadows. Paul looked around for a light switch, found one near the fridge. Once he snapped it on, it took a quick moment for his eyes to adjust, and there was Lyle Ledbetter, wielding a hatchet. "Lyle?" Paul croaked. Lyle took a long swing as the blade hissed past Paul's neck and buried itself into the plaster wall behind him. "Bury the hatchet," Lyle repeated and chuckled to himself. "Stop this!" Paul pleaded. "Please, Lyle, don't do—" Another swing and a miss. The heavy hatchet blade knocked the door of a cupboard loose, and it fell to the ground. "Hold still," Lyle said. "I'm trying to bury the hatchet." Lyle changed his attack and chopped at Paul, who had raised his arm in front of his face, and the blade hit the hard canvas of his Carhartt jacket. Paul yelped at the pain. He heard the ulna bone snap from the pressure. Had he not worn layers, he would probably have lost his arm. Another lunge, and Paul had slipped and fell onto his back. The tin of cookies were lying on the floor with him. He grabbed them and lifted them up in front of his face as the hatchet ripped into the tin and jammed. He twisted it, and Lyle lost his grip on the hatchet. The inertia pulled Lyle forward, and he fell flat on his face next to Paul. "What the fuck, Lyle?" Paul said, getting to his feet and curling his good fist. Paul stared in horror as Lyle lifted himself as if doing a push-up and then turned to face him. His face had been flattened. All the features looked as if they were painted roughly on a flat canvas. "Lyle?" Paul said, backing away. The thing that looked like his friend Lyle tried to mock him, but its mouth had been sealed shut by the fall, so it lunged at Paul, who connected with the thing's jaw. Paul looked at his fist. There should have been bone in his friend's face, but there was just flesh. Clay. He took another shot, and the Lyle thing went over a discarded chair and fell at a bad angle that would have killed a normal man. A normal man who had a bone structure, a spine to snap, or ribs to break. But this thing landed and took on the space around it. "That goddamn thing is clay," he thought to himself. "Jesus, Mary and Joseph, it's made of clay!" He picked up the hatchet and wrestled it from the cookie tin and walked over to what used to be his friend. "What the fuck are you?" Paul shouted at it. "And where's my friend?" The thing was beginning to melt. It opened up a hole in its head and tried to speak. "Friend belongs," it croaked in a gurgling voice, "to house now." "What the hell are you?" "Free. I'm free. Trapped there so long, and now free." "What do you mean belongs to the house?" "Take my place." The thing was now nothing but a clumpy brown puddle. "I took his." With that, it was now nothing but a slurry of mud. The house! A terrifying reality dawned on him. "Dear God, that fucking dollhouse is at my house! Liz, The kids! Still holding the hatchet, Paul ran out into the blustery night and pulled the cord on the snowmobile. Seven. And I need a sip. Liz didn't like doing laundry, but it was the only time she got peace and quiet. The kids and her husband wanted nothing to do with it, so they would always give her space. She loved the scent of the fabric softener as it drifted from the dryer vent, but hated the things she found in her family's dirty clothes, from period stains to shit stains, or bacon strips as Paul would so crudely call them. She just put them out of sight and out of mind. Just then, everything went dark. She froze, trying to adjust her eyes. "Kids?" she called out into the dark. They were always playing practical jokes on her. It was annoying at first, but became endearing after a while. "This isn't funny," she said with a slight smile on her lips. "I can't see a damn thing." Normally, the sound of kids chuckling made her heart warm, but there was something about it now that froze it solid. "Okay." Fear was stirring at the bottom of her stomach. "You had your fun, now turn on the lights." To her left, she could make out Lenny's voice. His laughter was noticeable, only by its tone. Otherwise, it was foreign to her, and that's what began to run around in her head. "Lenny," she snapped, "stop this right now!" Normally an obedient kid, her request went unheard. "Chrissy!" she hollered, hoping to find her middle daughter would hear her from her room. The light to the dining room came on. She wanted to walk out and scold her son, but something had frozen her feet where she stood. "Damn it, Lenny!" There was fear in her voice. "What are you up to?" Then it was all three of her children laughing down the hall from the dining room. And for some reason, this scared her the most. Something about them being united and scaring their mother just rubbed her the wrong way. "You kids are in a lot of trouble," she shouted from the laundry room. "Aw, Mom," Lenny said, "don't be such a party pooper." His inflection made her feel a bit more comfortable. Her feet shuffled, and then she walked out into the hallway. She turned, and there at the dining room table were her three children. Their smiles didn't look like their smiles. They were a stranger's expression on a familiar face. Sitting in the middle of the table was the dollhouse. Both halves were open like an open maw of some hideous creature. "Kids," she walked slowly to join them. "What are you doing?" "Join us, Mom," Jill said. "Yes, join us," Chrissy repeated. Liz didn't want to walk any further, but Lenny walked over to her and grabbed her hand. Something felt familiar in his touch, not like the familiar touch of a child, but the way that clay figurine she had handled earlier. She tried to pull away from her son's grip. "Come on, Mom," Lenny said. "No," she said dozily. I don't want to." "Come on, Mom," Jill said. "Join us." "Stop it, you guys!" Her stocking feet slid on the hardwood floor. "Please!" As she got to the dollhouse, she saw the likeness of Jill, still sitting on her bed in the dollhouse version of her room. That same sadness in its face, but this time, sitting on her miniature beanbag, the likeness of Chrissy, staring at a miniature phone, but with the same sad expression. "Look at mine, Mom," Lenny said. His little clay doll stared at a tiny TV set, his little mouth wide open in eternal terror and what looked like a teardrop leaking from the corner of his eyes. Suddenly, Liz understood. They placed the clay figure that was in the dollhouse laundry room in her hand. She looked down at it as it writhed and entwined with her fingers, pulsating as it crawled up her arms. "No!" she whimpered. "No, please!" "It's okay, Mom," Jill said. "We'll all be together." Whatever was in this dollhouse was trading places with the occupants of its owner's house. It had taken Lyle. That's why he acted so strange. And then Jill. And then the rest of her kids. "Please!" It was constricting against her. And she started to panic. 8. The skidoo hit the side of the snow fort he and Lenny had built for it the first blizzard of the season. The jolt almost threw him through the windshield. His broken arm throbbed, and he knew he'd need to get it in a sling into the hospital as soon as possible, but his family was top priority. Paul's boots clopped through the snow and thundered up the wooden steps of his back door. "Liz!" he hollered and didn't bother kicking his wet boots off. "Liz, where are you?" His teeth were grit from the pain in his arm. The dining room light was on and shined down on the dollhouse sitting on the table like a giant spider ready to pounce. "Kids!" he hollered. No answer. He walked up to the table, looking around for any signs of his family. There was a small cupboard just above the stairway. It bothered him ever since they had bought the house. There was no purpose for it. He had used a stepladder to look into it and see where it went, but it was just a storage space. And he and Liz never put anything in it because its existence bothered them somehow. He looked at the dollhouse, and sure enough, there was the same little cupboard, and this one made him feel even more uneasy than the actual one. Paul reached out to open it, and then he noticed all the blank figurines had now features and were given identities. "Oh, God," he croaked. "Oh, God, no!" He reached out and pulled open the little cupboard door, and there was the likeness of his best friend, Lyle. "Welcome home, honey," Liz said behind him. 9. It was 2 weeks to Christmas. A few snowstorms had closed Highway 91 coming in and out of Eagle City. Mick had never been one to think ahead when it came to gift shopping. And here he was, like every year, looking desperately for something for his wife and daughter. The main drag through town was barren. Wind blew snow into drifts that snaked across the street. Street lights glared at the blowing snow as ancient plastic Christmas decorations hung from the lights as they did every year for the past 50 years. There were a few shops in town, and he thought he'd be able to find something for the 2 females in his life. But unfortunately, there were only lights on at one shop. He pulled up to the curb and left his truck running. Stepping out into the blinding snow, he made his way to the front door of Lakeside Mercantile and opened it. The smell of hot apple cider hit his nostrils, and Burl Ives was singing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And standing at the register was a man and his wife. They seemed like they were just standing there staring off into the distance, and it was like the jingle of the bell above the door brought them to life. Hi, he said, a little nervous. "Help you?" Paul said blankly. Yeah, I'm looking for... Mick began, and then a dollhouse caught his eye. And that, my friends, is home is where the heart is. I hope you guys enjoyed that story. It was a 27-pager, and it took over an hour to get through. So there we go. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Bobby, I hope that you'll forgive me for victimizing your family like that. I hope your family forgives me. I imagine Lil's probably not going to let me in your house again. So yeah. I'm used to being banned from your house now. It's getting to be kind of a thing, I think. So, but yes, I hope you guys enjoy that. Thanks, Shannon. I'm glad you enjoyed it as well. Let's see what we got going on here. My phone's going nuts. Okay. No badgers, Chuck. No need for the badgers. The badgers would have gotten replicated by the clay, and they would have been part of the house. So, damn 2 straight nights. Yeah, you're going to need a nap. Yeah, either that or you're just going to have to start doing cocaine. That'll keep you up forever. So, but yeah, I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun writing it, and I was pretty anxious to present it to you guys. There is a link on here somewhere on this broadcast. There is a link on how you can purchase this. You can get it in paperback, or you can get it in on Kindle. So, and of course, Kindle is cheaper. If you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free. So, I'm glad you liked it, Jessica. Thank you. So, I'm glad you liked it too, Beth. I took some liberties with you guys, but yeah, I'm glad you all liked it. Steph is the lucky one that gets she's kind of my guinea pig for these stories that pop up in my head and get written out. So she's developing a callus. But William, this was fun. Bobby is one of my oldest friends. Bobby is one hell of a guy, and thank you very much for coming out on his recommendation. That was very cool of you, Bobby. How am I supposed to sleep? You're not supposed to sleep, buddy. This is the payback you get for making me play Christmas songs the other night. So there. So anyhow, yeah, it was kind of fun just to have an off night to do this. It was fun to do it on Halloween with you guys. Yeah, this will have to be just a yearly thing now. I think is what we'll do is we'll just prompt a short story for you guys to help me develop, and then once we get that, then I'll read it on Halloween night. I think that's what we should do. So, anyhow, we're going to be. I have a story for this year's Christmas holiday special, and I'll read that to you guys in December around Christmas time. Next week on Horror Hump Day, which is on Wednesday, we're going to be starting the Sleepwalker series, and that's do I got a copy around here somewhere? I think so. Let me see. I do, but I think it's on a bookshelf somewhere in my house here. So anyhow, my Sleepwalker series, and yeah, it's every chapter is a short story, and that kind of ties in with everybody else, with all the other ones. It's kind of like Pavor Nocturnus, actually. It's kind of how the whole concept started. But yeah, we're going to start reading that. And since it's about two buddies that go hunting up in northern Minnesota, and they end up in this place called the Wendigo Woods. And one of them falls through a thin spot in time-space, and he keeps falling into these different realities, and he's trying to find his way back to his own reality, or whatever, and every reality is a short story in the book. So, anyhow, that's what we'll be starting next week on Wednesday. I still haven't gotten anything set for tunes for Tuesday. And you know me, I usually do that in the last minute thing. Beth Peterson Paulson is looking at me funny. I'm scared. Join them, Bobby. Join them. You'll all be together. Steph can't find a guinea pig emoji. Huh. I think they do have one on there. Maybe just use like a gerbil one or a hamster. Oh, let's see. Who else we got here? To those of you who came here in behest of Bobby or Beth Paulson, thank you guys very much. Those of you who came here in behest of Stephanie, thank you very much. All of you guys who shared this event tonight, thank you. The audience is growing, which is really cool, and also the way that the algorithm tells Facebook, like, hey, Brad's actually doing something. Maybe we can monetize his page. I could monetize this page and any of my content really fast by doing a lot of really dumb things. And while I do very much want to entertain you guys, I want to be able to entertain you guys with stuff that I create, which is something that I enjoy doing, which is playing guitar and singing and writing books and writing stories and telling you those stories. I won't lower myself to do stupid little tricks or whatever stunts to get more likes and all that other stuff. It's not. That's not who I am. It's not worth it. Oh, Kate fell asleep, huh? Well, she'll have to watch it on YouTube. So anyhow, just what I'm saying is that I don't want to be one of those creators. I just want to be a guy who converses with other people and entertains other people. And so here we are, and this is what we're doing. So maybe next story I will make it to the end. Poor Steph always gets killed in my stories of late. I don't know if that's a psychological thing or whatnot. If you would just clap at the end, you think that's what will get me there, Kev? Yeah, maybe I'll have to. I might have to just start doing that. I'll clap. I can bring myself to clap. So, and just get a penicillin shot later or whatever. But yeah. Anyhow, thank you guys very much. I hope you guys had a great Halloween. Thank you for picking up my book if you've done it already. Jason, I know for sure you've gotten yours or ordered yours. Kevin, I got yours. I don't know if I'm going to send it to you or if you want to wait till when you're up here for Christmas and I'll hand it to you. Kyle got his today. I'll be bringing Bobby's to him. And Dwayne left as well. So anyhow, thank you guys very much and enjoy the rest of your week and your weekend. I'm going to enjoy mine. I've had today off and I got tomorrow off and then of course Saturday and Sunday. So, and I'm kind of glad I had today off because we got a heck of a snowfall. It didn't stick and it's starting to melt already, but yeah, I'm glad I wasn't on that morning commute. Lenny says, Merry Halloween. Good old Lenny. Oh, yeah. That poor kid. So, anyhow, thank you guys very much. Wow, great story, but I am not going to sleep tonight. You're a very talented. Well, thank you very much, Joan. I very much appreciate that. That means loads to me. Thank you. Your mom is so nice, Bobby. So, 84 and sunny down in Florida. So, Kevin, do you know for sure if you're coming up or not around Christmas time? So, I took the whole week of Christmas off, so there might be a chance in there for you and I to get together for a cup of Joe or something, I'd like to see you. So I don't know. You'll have to text me and let me know when you're going to be up here, and we'll figure out how I'm going to get you your book. Otherwise, I can send it to Florida too, so that's no issue as well. So I might. I think I might have December 21st to 26th. Oh, okay. Yeah, I will be able to do that. Let me know when we can meet up somewhere. Yes, Shannon, I will do that. Most definitely. Yeah, well, I've got a lot of time off this month and next month. So it will probably be on one of those days. I'll come down and let you know. And since you're retired, you're off every day. So I'm sure we'll get something to work. So, all right. All right. Good to see everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for an hour and a half. I appreciate it. I super appreciate it. I had a lot of fun, and I don't think I've been one of the funnest Halloweens I've spent with people. So, thanks again. We'll see you guys next week on Tunes for Tuesday. Tune in Sundays or stop by Sunday. Speaking of Sundays, okay, we got to talk about this coffee with friends thing since I have you all here. Coffee with friends. How that started was I took a picture of myself one Sunday, and I was drinking a cup of coffee, not unlike this one. And took a picture of myself, and I just said good morning. I said a few inspiring words, and then hashtagged it coffee with friends. And then the next weekend, a bunch of people asked me, why isn't your coffee picture up? And so I'm like, oh, I didn't realize this was a thing. And they're like, yeah, it's a thing now. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I started doing it every Sunday. Well, then it kind of died off last year, and I stopped doing it. And then trying to get back into it again. I'd like to do it as a live stream on a Sunday morning, drinking coffee with you guys. And I don't always have the energy for that. And a lot of times lately I've been waking up at like 11:30 on Sunday morning. So, but yeah, some people have said, hey, where's Steph? And everybody can hear her always in the background, but she is here. I didn't lock her in the basement or anything and, tell her to bring the lotion back up the basket. But, yeah, so I'll have to do maybe a live stream coffee with friends or whatever, and go bug Steph. Usually she's kind of half waking up, and I hate to shove a camera in her face and say, "Oh, look at everybody, honey." So, but yeah, we'll do something. But coffee with friends is a thing where you participate. And while I do appreciate everybody saying good morning on there, commenting good morning and whatever, what I'd really like is to see your face. And you're not supposed to do your hair. It's supposed to be when you get up in the morning. See your face with a cup of coffee or whatever it is you drink in the morning. Could be whiskey. I don't judge you. Could be a doobie. I don't judge you. I'm not here to put you in jail. But it's coffee with friends. And post that in the comments of Coffee with Friends. And that's how Coffee with Friends is supposed to go. But you know what? You guys just do you. And I'm going to do me, and we'll see each other then. So, hey, Todd, good to see you here. I hope you made it through the whole show. If not, you can always catch it later. It's also on YouTube. If you guys don't know, I've got a YouTube channel as well that's hooked onto this little thing here. And I'm babbling. And I've taken enough of your time. Thank you all very much. Peace and a bottle of hair grease. And, hey, if you are looking for some winter reading, Thin Spots by Brad Bodeker. Available on Amazon. All right. See you guys all later. Thanks for joining me for Halloween. Mwah. Happy Halloween, everybody. And boom. Peace and a bottle of hair grease. There you go. I clap.